Hi, my name is Eugenia Giampetruzzi. I'm an Emory debater. I'm here with Susan Cahoon, a Board of Trustee member and past Emory debater. So I want to begin talking sort of about why Emory. And more specifically, in order to commit to an institution for so long and invest in it for so long, I'm very curious as to why Emory inspires that devotion in you, why you feel dedicated to the Barkley Forum and to maintaining that relationship.
Well, Emory played a pivotal role in my life at a sort of a pivotal stage. I was very young when I came here, through a lot of family circumstances involving a potential move to another city that would have had me going into a new school in my senior year in high school, and also had already taken many of the subjects that were available in that particular school. I ended up coming in the summer as an early admission student. And it was the first time I'd ever been to Atlanta, the first time I'd set foot on the Emory campus. And I started that summer of 1964. I was 15 at the time, turned 16 in mid-October after finishing one quarter. We were on the quarter system then. So it was a time, just by age, when you're maturing and making your way and finding out some of your limitations and then some of your abilities. And this was, for me, just about the perfect place. Smaller than it is today. You could have very close relationships, not only with your fellow undergraduates, but if you were interested in getting to know a faculty member and being involved, if you wanted to be active in student activities, you could. It was an easy place. And I sort of had a lot of, I would say, somewhat pent-up ambitions in those regards that I was able to fulfill. So this just seemed like a terrific place. And I had a wonderful time. And one of the highlights of that experience really was the Barkley Forum and the debate activity. I had never debated in high school. We didn't have a debate program at all. But seeing a debate as part of freshman orientation got me interested, and I sort of got encouraged by my mother. If that looks like something interesting, they say you can try out, try out. So I did. That was an interesting process. You might want to hear some of the stories of Glenn Pelham and what he did to select people for the Barkley Forum, but in any event, I made it through and then debated for 4 years and thoroughly enjoyed it. Meanwhile, enjoyed the rest of campus life and made a tremendous number of lifelong friends. Felt I got a very solid educational background. It enabled me to transition very easily to, one, get admission to, and two, do well once I went to Harvard for law school. And that in turn set me up for the rest of my professional career. And I practiced law with the same firm in Atlanta now for coming up on 50 years.
Wow. I want to pick up sort of on how you said it helped you transition into your legal career and specifically Harvard Law School. And in terms of debate, what skills do you think that being both a competitive debater but also part of the debate culture at Emory helped you once you reached law school and once you had to navigate sort of the legal field?
Well, debate makes you focus a lot on analysis and reasoning and the ability to organize and marshal arguments. And so much of what you do, both as a practicing lawyer and in writing a good exam paper as an answer once you're in law school, you're trying to spot issues, you're trying to lay out the reasons for the answer that you're giving, and often the question may have a little fact pattern that you have to come up with something, so organizing it, recognizing there are time limits being imposed on you, so you have to be disciplined about how you're doing it. All those are great skills. And I think on the thing of learning your substantive subject matter, the fact that for a full year you were immersed in a topic, I was far more knowledgeable about some topics when I was a mere college student than I am as an educated voting adult these days, because you'd get an important topic of political interest and you would read both sides. You would be reading journals of obscure academic subjects. You would be immersing in a field and you would be mastering data and assimilating it quickly, all of which are very transferable skills to succeeding academically in law school and to practicing law. And then, of course, for those of us who went into the litigation side of things, being comfortable on your feet, talking, making arguments in front of a judge, persuading a jury, all of those were, part and parcel of some of the skills that you learned when you were a debater. You just learned that you needed to slow down your speaking pace a bit if you were talking to a typical judge or jury. I came in the era before the super machine gun rattling. You could actually understand every word people said in a debate without having to stress your eardrums quite so much. But it was still a faster talking pace than you really want to do in being conversational with a jury or in walking a judge through an oral argument.
Definitely the differences in speaking style from past debate to modern debate are a big change. And I mean, another thing related to that is the whole Barkley Forum is very curious as to what sort of tournaments looked like when you debated, given that, now we're virtual. We're debating over Zoom, through computers. A lot of the communication aspects of in-person debate are no longer present for those tournaments. And sort of what was your experience attending a college debate tournament and what it looked like?
Well, I'll speak about it on two levels. From an interpersonal standpoint, obviously you formed great bonds with your individual colleague, with the other people that you traveled with, and with the coach or assistant coach. And most of the way we traveled was in a car. We did not have a budget for much flying. There were only 2 or 3 tournaments in a year. And we would often do things on the cheap in connection with flying. There were student standby travel then that got a cheaper ticket. There was the thought of, in my senior year, giving me some West Coast exposure. Pelham thought that would be a good idea as we were thinking about NDT. So why don't you pair up with sophomore George Selby, who I'd never debated with before, but he lives in the LA area, and his parents will be flying him to California anyway, so we just have to buy 1 airplane ticket. And you can go pair up with George, and since Stanford and Southern Cal had sort of back-to-back tournaments to encourage Eastern schools to invest in coming out there, you'll go to those 2 tournaments together as colleagues, which we did. We did fairly well. We'd done some practice debating together before the holiday break and came back. But that was a sort of tight budget economy era, but a lot of war stories from being in those cars for literally nonstop drives from Atlanta to Dartmouth, Atlanta to Detroit, Atlanta to Chicago, Atlanta to Miami. We never flew to any of those places. To the Georgetown tournament over Thanksgiving. We drove everywhere. So that was one aspect that I don't think you get quite so much of these days. Another thing that being with people from other schools gave you is you got to know a lot of people from schools across the country. I've told others that it reminded me a little bit of what I think happens with the professional golf tour. For 13 to 15 tournaments a year, if you're on the top team, you were going around and you were seeing some of your counterparts from 20 other universities that were on the circuit regularly. And when it came time to go to law school at a national law school, I knew a lot of people, unless you'd gone to maybe Harvard as an undergrad and were at Harvard Law School or a couple of the other Ivies. It's a big place. My starting class had 603, I think it was, for my first year. I knew over 50 people in my first year class who were fellow debaters. 4 of us immediately formed a study group, like if you've ever read the book or seen the old series about the 1Ls and whatever. Guy from Case West, back then it was just Western Reserve, it was before it became Case Western. Debater from Michigan State, a debater from George Washington, and a debater from Emory. And the 4 of us happened to be in the same first year section, and we were an instant study group. And I knew 25 or 30 in the second year class and 15 or 20 in the third year class. So that was an interesting sidelight of just having much friends when I got to a place like Harvard for law school. And we immediately saw each other and hi Susan, hi Greg, etc. We knew each other at law school.
What are your most memorable moments at Emory with your debate coaches?
Well, there was really only one coach of the Barkley Forum when I was here, and that was Glenn Pelham. There were a couple of folks who were, in law school who would occasionally judge practice rounds and be available to do driving on some of our distant trips. There was actually another person named Ed Lee. It's very different than the current Ed Lee. Hoyt was hanging around and occasionally drove people somewhere while he was in the medical school, Hoyt Young. But basically, Glenn Pelham was the coach. And I don't know how he was compensated. They might have paid him a little bit extra to do the debate coaching, but he also had the position with a title like director of the student union or some such title. I can't remember now, but he essentially, like the student center board group reported to him. He reported to the dean of student affairs directly. He had a lot of responsibility for managing student activities going on within the old alumni memorial building. And so that was sort of his position, and he also was coaching the debate team. And how they parsed that out in his comp package, I never knew, never needed to know. But he had other things that he would do and other student activities that sort of reported through him other than just coaching debate. Mm-hmm. But his primary passion, I think, was to coach debate. And he was an imposing figure in doing that. I mean, you've probably seen pictures or heard descriptions. I mean, was he about 6'4", weighed well over 300 pounds, a deep basso profundo voice that had been trained at Juilliard among one of his interesting sidelights. He'd been a member of the Georgia General Assembly, elected from Cairo, Georgia, his hometown. Had the interest in politics, was widely read, was a great trivia player if you needed somebody to play trivia, because he knew a little bit about so many things, it seemed. He was just a fascinating person, literally larger than life and figuratively larger than life kind of person that I think most people that stayed with the program very long have just hard to separate how many different memories of Pelham. He always said, now, one of the things when you're doing public speaking is you need to be able to stand on your 2 feet and look squarely at the group, but you need to be balanced to do it. You need to angle your feet in a certain way. You need to be able to rise up on your toes and not be wiggly wobbly. And so I demonstrated the old Pelham practice of rising up on your toes and speaking to them. And he said, now you also have to sustain your speaking. You have to be breathing from the diaphragm properly. And place your hands here. Realize. He did all these kinds of little things that were all news to me, since I'd never had anybody try to coach on public speaking at all. And just, listening to him critique a debate was wonderful. And he was interested in what was going on. Some people would say, he was a nosy Parker. He wanted to know what you were up to. Were you dating the right person? Or were you, how's your life going kind of thing. But he genuinely cared about his people, and that was very evident to them. It was a lot of fun when you're very into any particular experience and feel like it's valuable and you're getting something out of it. And I think Emory offers to its undergraduates a lot of different ways to experience that. I think the scope, for example, of independent research that's available for undergraduates is vastly increased over what was available when I was an undergrad. And the opportunities for that kind of, from a scholarly standpoint, deeper involvement as an undergraduate have just grown exponentially. So hopefully someone who comes here today will find it still a welcoming, nurturing place, an intimate place, but with just many more ways to experience it than I think were even available when I was an undergrad.